Alright, Gen Con. The cat is being very noisy, and I really hope he doesn't ruin this. Okay. Hi, I'm Jake, and welcome back to Get This Game, where we're all about the board gaming goodness. And speaking of that, if you're a board gaming fan, now is like the perfect time to be alive each year, because late August, early July, it is Gen Con season, the biggest convention all about board games in the United States. Now, there's over 500 entries in the Board Game Geek preview list for Gen Con this year, and there's no way that you're ever going to be able to see every single game and go through every single game. So that's why I'm here. I just put together what a lot of people have done, my own list of top 10 games to keep my eye out for Gen Con from afar. I'm not actually going this year, but a ton of these games are pretty much going to be available right around Gen Con or shortly after. This is kind of board gaming's big moment to release all of their big titles for the year. So we're going to talk about just 10 games. Some of them you may have heard, some may even be out already, but all of them are going to be available for purchase at Gen Con. So if you're going, if you're just keeping your eyes out for some other content from other creators or just ones you want to keep an eye out for to buy, this is where you want to be, because I'm just going to offer my 10, the ones that stick out to me. If you follow me on TikTok or Instagram, if you don't, you probably should go do that now, but you should have an idea of my style of game, just my typical taste and what I like. So here are my top 10 games that are going to be available at Gen Con that I have my eye on. And if you do like my list or don't, please do leave me a comment on what has made your top Gen Con list for this year. And maybe even consider subscribing, hitting the bell, all of that good stuff, because I try to post once a week and keep things going on either TikTok or Instagram too. That helps out a lot. First off, I gotta start with an honorable mention, because like no top game list can be without an honorable mention, because this is the game that was actually going to be like my #1 anticipated until I realized that it's actually on the demo only list, but that is Chaos Cove from Ape Games. This is a worker placement style game where you are going to be anthropomorphic animals defending an island from incoming barbarians and pirates. What made this one stick out to me is the really unique worker placement. Normally, a worker is a worker. They might have some sort of little powers and difference and variations throughout the game, but generally, you take a worker, you put it on a spot, that's worker placement. In Chaos Cove, what it sells is this idea of 16 different, completely unique workers that you're going to be using and manipulating on the board. Each of them have their own different art, but also completely different power. Not only that, but of course, all of the locations that you're going to be putting down also have their own unique powers and effects. So the puzzle here is all about really choosing and figuring out what combinations of worker powers are going to combine best with the game state and the different locations that you can place on. This just seems really combo-y to me, really interesting. A little bit of a twist where there's that heightened worker placement asymmetry going on with the workers. So I'm really curious to try this one out and hopefully see down the line what it has to offer. Did I say workers enough times? I'm not sure. That's my honorable mention. But finally, with my actual list, number 10 is going to be Harvest from Keymaster Games. This is a reprint or like a bit of a re-implementation from an older version of Harvest. And essentially, you're doing everything a farmer should do. You are going to be planting crops, harvesting them, trying to sell them for as much money as possible. Here, the art really roped me in. I talked about it in an old news roundup on my TikTok channel. And normally, farm games just aren't my jam or aren't my style. I've just had not the best experience with them in the past. Sorry, sue me, but like Agricola, Caverna, those just aren't my favorite style of games, mostly because they are mixed with some art that just isn't my jam. But Harvest just looks absolutely gorgeous. And what I also like about this is it has this little mechanic very similar to Viticulture to determine player order. At the start of the game, you're going to be drafting different cards that will either give you starting income, or they're always going to give you starting income, and then they're also going to dictate the player order. So I really like that idea of how each round you have the chance to make that decision between going earlier in the turn order for that round, or instead going later but cashing in on some really big bonuses that you need. That's something that I really love, and I really like the dynamic of any game that kind of lets you choose where you go in the turn player order. It's not just set each round. So really interesting. Again, the art and that sort of opening mechanic feeds into just an overall system that I'd like to try out. And that's number 10, Harvest. At number 9 is Pagan Fate of Roanoke. Really interesting here. It kind of follows in the footsteps of other deduction games like Blood on the Clock Tower, where yeah, deduction is going on, but it's all wrapped up in all kinds of other stuff and things happening. Really interesting that this is a 2-player only deduction game. So you have either witches or kind of like pagan followers up against hunters who are trying to track them down. You're trying to gain influence within the town. A lot of stuff going on here, certainly, but I also am really just enthralled by the mystery of Roanoke Island. If you're not familiar, the quick story is that, you know, settlers, colonists, let's be frank, showed up to Roanoke Island and started to set up shop. They were like, okay, we're going to stay here, half of us, and then the other half go back to England and tell people that they can kind of come over and we can settle this land. Half of the crew did that, and then they came back like years and years later, and every single semblance of any sort of town or civilization was just gone. The island was completely empty, and to this day, no one knows what actually happened. So just a really cool kind of theme and story that I lock onto, and so that kind of flows through into my interest in this game. I'm very theme forward. I will say, though, not necessarily sure if this is going to be one I would easily get to the table, just in the nature of it being deduction, something that my fiance doesn't necessarily gravitate towards. But, you know, hopefully I can find somebody else to play this game with. This is Roanoke. I screwed it up. This is Pagan Fate of Roanoke. At number 8 is Frozen Frontier. Now, there's been a lot of games lately that have come out that have been all about civilization and humankind ditching the planet and just going out to try a second go at it. Games like Evacuation, Revive, all of these games kind of talk about the end of one planet and the gathering of resources on another and that kind of escape. So very similar here with Frozen Frontier. Here you're discovering a planet to harvest its resources, but it is a freezing cold one, so resources are going to be scarce. Pretty abstract, but essentially what you're going to be doing is, you know, choosing to either build up buildings in different cities or going out to harvest and then deliver those resources back over to Earth. Just a really cool kind of general kind of Euro-y style game from the looks of it, but what really ropes me in is the fact that it is Cosmodrome. They are the makers and publishers of one of my favorite games of all time, Smartphone Inc. So really, I just have a lot of trust and faith in their kind of design pedigree and what they choose to publish. So more than anything, that is what ropes me into Frozen Frontier. At number 7 is Arcs from Leader Games. Oh my gosh, there has been so much coverage for this, and I've been trying to temper my expectations and not jump too hard onto the hype train. But frankly, it is Cole Wehrle. It is, you know, Leader Games, the publishers of Root, among other really popular titles. So going into this, let's be frank, this is probably going to be one of the most hyped games. In fact, the last 3 times I have missed my weekly game night with my local gaming club, they played this. And frankly, I'm a little bit jealous because I at least want to see what's going on. This combines trick-taking with kind of like area control and space exploration. Space isn't always my number one favorite theme, but I can get behind this. And honestly, I've been struggling to try and wrap my head around how exactly trick-taking works in this kind of bigger asymmetric world that Cole Wehrle typically delivers in his games. From the sounds of it, you can choose to either stick with cards that are going to win you tricks and therefore win you more resources, items, etc., or you can choose to play a card that maybe isn't as strong in a trick-taking setting, but what it does have is really powerful actions that kind of power up the rest of what you're going to do on your turn. So all of that mixed in, the design pedigree once again, the publishing pedigree, and just wanting to know and figure out what all the hype is about, along with just kind of how that dynamic works between trick-taking and space exploration, has Arcs at number 7. Let's go from one end of the spectrum to the other with my number 6 game, Landmarks from Mandala Yogos. Hopefully I said that right. Apologies, it is not my forte. But here, this is a word guessing game. Very similar in the same vein as Codenames, So Clover, games like that, where basically you're going to be giving clues that will hopefully connect different words on a map. And it is up to the rest of your team to kind of look at the clues and the different words that are connecting together to try and figure out what your new clue word is trying to convey and say. I'm going to say that I'm on the hunt for a game that kind of gives that same feeling of Codenames, but kind of with some new, fresh take. In fact, I've overheard some of my coworkers who maybe aren't into board games necessarily completely at all, 100%, but they even went so far as to say, like, I'm getting sick of Codenames. Like, I always thought Codenames was a game that was just like everywhere. Like, everyone kind of universally liked it. I still have fun with it, but it's interesting to note that maybe Codenames is getting a little bit stale for those out there who maybe only play one game a year. So I'm really interested in seeing if Landmarks can be a game that kind of gives that same sense of, I guess, like good feeling and just kind of satisfaction in being able to lead your team to victory in a package that is just a little bit fresh, a little bit new. At number 5, Mandalorian Adventures from Unexpected Games. Now, I will caveat this. This one's partially on my list because I'm stoked to play it myself. I am expecting to get it as a review copy from Asmodee Canada, so assuming that does come in, I'm really excited to get it to the table, so that is why it's on the list. It is going to be available for purchase at Gen Con, though. And I like it because you're playing through the first season of The Mandalorian. Like, how sweet is that? I'm a big fan of adventure-style books. I'm a sucker for one of those map books with the spiral binding, where you're essentially flipping through different pages to kind of discover the story and see what new maps and parts of the world you have to deal with. Just really all that sort of stuff gives me joy in games like Sleeping Gods. I think this is a bit of a smaller, tighter package, but I'm still curious to be able to play through that campaign. Also a big fan of the fact that this is a 1 to 4 player option. I am most likely going to be playing this solo. It's nice to be able to play games like this solo, especially in a campaign setting where you can't necessarily get the same people to the table every single time when you want to play through the campaign. I also just know for a fact that my fiance Jenna is not going to want to play this with me. She is not a Star Wars fan. Please be kind to her in the comments, but yeah, I'm not going to be able to get this to the table with her, even though we typically like playing this style of game together. It will be solo, but still very excited to see how the story unfolds in Mandalorian Adventures. At number 4 is The Gang from Cosmos. So what's cool about this one is the elevator pitch for it is essentially cooperative poker. You are going to be working together to play out different poker hands, Texas Hold'em style, flipping over cards, trying to suss out and give limited communication about who will have the best hand in any given round. Now, I thought at first this would be a game like, oh, if people like poker, they're going to like this. I actually disagree with that. I think a lot of what poker players like is that sort of competitive nature of the game, and I don't think they're going to be able to necessarily wrap their heads around working together in a poker style game. The competition is just kind of what drives that hobby or that interest. But I've found that with other games where you have to just quickly convey, hey guys, we're playing to try and get the best poker style hand, that's a concept that just people in general, especially non-gamers, can wrap their heads around quickly. And that wrap their head around quickly factor is what I look for in very short, kind of approachable 20 minutes games like The Gang is. I've played other titles that have a similar sort of style, like Truffle Shuffle, where again, you're trying to build up poker style hands. This one becomes a hit because again, it's a familiar concept when you're just playing with that kind of standard deck of cards mentality. So The Gang, a super short game that I expect to be pretty welcoming, and I always like cooperative options, so hopefully that combined with limited communication, which again I'm finding myself becoming more and more of a fan of, will make The Gang a winner. Number 3 is kind of a cheat again because I have actually played this game and got it as a review copy from Nanox Games. It is Evenfall. This is a game where you are going to be playing as a kind of guild or a coven of witches. You're going to be building up different places of power to try and add rituals and perform rituals on those spaces. There's a little bit of worker placement involved. There's a little bit of area majority going on here. And of course, a lot of multi-use cards and hand management throughout. This game, just early impressions, again, review copy provided by the publisher, really, really strong. I'm going to be talking about it more in depth a little bit down the line, but based off of my early plays, I've really enjoyed this. The kind of decision of how the different cards and places of power you have in your tableau can mean different things and give you different benefits throughout the course of the game. That's something I want to keep exploring. This one is going to be, again, available at Gen Con. If you do get the chance to demo it, check it out, and hopefully buy it if you enjoy it, I would highly recommend checking it out. It's made a really good impression right out of the gate. Number 2 is going to be Rock Hard 1977. Spoiler alert, it is currently the top upvoted or thumbs up game in this list on Board Game Geek. And I understand why. It has gotten a ton of PR, and the DeVere team has done a great job in kind of pushing this game out. It is designed by Jackie Fox, who was the bassist for the band The Runaways, so already a very high kind of rock and roll pedigree there. But if you know anything about me, you know that I really like emergent storytelling, where I'm given kind of the building blocks and the basic sort of concept of being a character, in this case, the member of a rock band, and then just getting to play around in the sandbox and do all of the things that a rock star would do. Booking gigs, performing in them, rehearsing. All of this stuff kind of comes together in this worker placement setting. I've read the design diary for Jackie Fox. It looks like she had a lot of thought put into it. She's theme first and kind of theme design first, which I'm a fan of personally. There's a little bit of a weird thing going on here where you have to have like a part-time job or like a day job to be able to fund your rock and roll dreams. I don't know how that's going to go or how I feel about that. It feels like work. And homework, and I don't know that that's my jam when I'm playing a board game. But again, just the world and the story that you're going to get to create each time you play it. Like, oh, this time I was really down on my luck, but then I got my big break through this one gig and I was able to turn the tides. All of that little emergent storytelling stuff comes through in a game that seems very theme forward, and that's why it's my number 2. And the number 1 game I'm going to have my eyes on for Gen Con is going to be Neo Dreams from Open Border Studios. I've mentioned Smartphone Inc. already as one of my favorite games of all time once. And in this time, I'm going to mention it again because Ivan Lashin, the designer of Smartphone Inc., is also the designer of this one. Here, it's kind of this really weird alternate universe or alternate future where people can manufacture and create dreams and then sell them to the public. So you're going to be playing as the corporation that does this type of thing, and you're going to try and be competing for the most money. It's another economic game, very similar to what Lashin has done before. I think why this one intrigues me, even though there's limited information about it right now, is again, the designer. Ivan Lashin did amazing things and kind of innovative things with action selection in Smartphone Inc. And then how bidding can work and be a dynamic in how Furnace operates. So he does such a good job of just taking a very familiar concept and putting on what I like to say a little bit of stank to it. So I'm very curious to see in this one being a little bit more worker placement focused, but still being very driven in economy. That's my jam, quite frankly. Ivan Lashin is my jam. I've loved all of the other games that I've played under him. And so that mixed with a theme that's kind of crazy and weird and interesting to wrap your head around. That's why Neo Dreams is my number 1 board game to check out at Gen Con. So there you go. There were my top 10 games that I certainly want to keep my eye out for Gen Con, and maybe you will too. Hopefully it helped you out. Maybe discovered a few that aren't on your list or weren't on other people's lists. I found a few of these that I was like, why is no one talking about this? So I was really excited to kind of explore that and build this out. Once again, if you do like what you see here and you want more board gaming goodness, please do consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you can know when I post my next one. Again, follow me on TikTok or Instagram if you like short form content. And as always, we will see you next time. And if you're going to Gen Con, have fun and be safe.